and there's only one word spoken in the entire scene, the word home. Now, usually in a 6-minute piece of film, you have to like work around a lot of dynamics between characters, dialogue, action, things happening, and in this sequence, it was just music and the image of this tragic dark man character wandering through these dismal alleys and back industrial yards, sort of setting up a new laboratory for himself, and it's just me in the image, and I had such a wonderful time doing that. So we'll have to see what comes out, because the movie's not completely finished yet, but I'm real pleased with that one.
You were pretty vocal when the Batman situation, the release of your score came after, or the release of your album came after Prince and all that. Have you reached a sort of resolution to that situation? Because it seems like it's now happening again in Dick Tracy.
Well, first of all, my vocalness was taken way out of proportion and way out of context, because I would do interviews where people would say, I would get on the phone, I mean, even in Newsweek, I mean, there was a thing where I got on the phone, well, what do you think about the fact that your album is kind of being pushed aside in favor of Prince's? And I'd go, well, I kind of expected that would happen. I mean, here you've got a major pop album versus an orchestral album. Orchestral score albums are always to a much more limited audience. And I was critical of the fact that the Prince album didn't say songs from and or inspired by the soundtrack, that it was called the soundtrack. And that was the only part of it that I ever really criticized. And then I would go on to say, on the other hand, I think that there's very little precedent for this. I think it was really a bold move that Warner Brothers even decided to release 2 albums, because if you look at the history of films with songs in them, they usually just forget about the fact that there even is a score in the movie, and they'll call anything a soundtrack album. So I think on the one hand there was confusion, but on the other hand there was very little precedent for how to deal with that, and very little precedent for having 2 albums, and I thought it was a very bold move, and a great move that Warner Brothers did that, because I think that it's better to have the 2 elements separate. People can either buy songs or they can buy the orchestral score instead of trying to jumble it together, which I never thought works well. So then by the time the article would be in the paper, it would just say, the complaining composer, Elfman critical of the fact that the da-da-da on the Prince album, and it made me sound like I was very bitter and very vocal, and I wasn't. If anything, I was making comments in regards to the record soundtrack field in general. It wasn't even about this particular project, and I always tried to balance the criticism of making things more clear with the fact that this is something new, and I think in time it will work itself out, and it's a bold move, and I'd like to see it happen more in the future. But they never print that part of it. So really, whatever you think that I said is only half of what I said or may have said. There was always going to be a Prince album out in Batman. When I was doing the score to the movie, there was never even going to be a score released. And it was because John Peters got very excited about it that there was a score. So I went from having nothing planned and no chances of having anything to having my own album out. And I was really happy about that. So I'm glad I have a chance to maybe put this in perspective, because a lot of the so-called bitterness that there was about that project really doesn't exist. I was elated when I found out that we were going to have a score album released.
So the situation with Dick Tracy happening again, it's not really happening again. It's
no,
the same sort of...
it's the same sort of thing. I mean, for one thing, the Madonna album says songs from and inspired by, and that's all I was ever talking about in the first place with the Prince score album on Batman. So already I see that there are steps moving in the right direction. I think that to me solves the whole problem. You buy an album that says the score, a soundtrack from the movie. You buy an album that says songs from or inspired by. Then at least it's right there. You know what you're getting, and there's none of this, well, I thought I was getting the soundtrack, but I don't remember hearing this in the soundtrack, and where's the main theme if this is the soundtrack, and all that kind of stuff, which got a little bit aggravating in the Batman album. But, you know, like I say, in the Madonna album, I think that they actually really clarified things very well.
I can see your side of it. I was reading this.
Mark, I have to change tape.
Okay, just a couple more questions.
I mean, that was really classic. When I saw the caption, the complaining composer, in Newsweek. That really killed me. Because here I was saying actually a lot of really supportive things about the concept of 2 albums and how it's a great trend for film music, and it made it look like I was blasting the whole process, which I wasn't.
Mark, how much longer? Just a couple more questions. Easy question. Round. Yeah, easy.
Oh, there's another door. Anybody who wants to get in can get in. I mean, all they need to do is go around. Pardon me?
Have they been wiggling behind you?
No, just once, but it's locked anyway.
It's not that dangerous. Green. Okay.
Yeah, it's a crazy business, the business of doing...
Well, it's funny, I have a quote here from an LA Times article, July 16th, 1989, that you say that there's a lot of political favors that play a role in the distribution of albums, and that automatically makes it seem like there's a negative thing.
Yeah, but there's politics involved with everything. The entire film and record industry, to a great extent, is political. Now, the point is that people come in with a story. This is the story they want to make. I want to make a story about that this is political and this is all one-sided. And so they'll talk to you for a half an hour. Now, out of a half an hour of conversation, there are certainly 3 or 4 comments which, if you take out of context, can be quoted to make it sound like you're lambasting something. I was often made to look like I was really blasting the whole soundtrack album thing and making it into a huge controversy on Batman, where it wasn't. I had a criticism, and I also had a major compliment in regards to this trend is great for composers and soundtrack albums. On Scrooged, there was a soundtrack album that was released that was all songs. Not even so much as 1 2-minute main title from the movie was on the album. So I've been through that a number of times. And I would love to see what they did on Batman carry over to more movies, where the audience can either buy a bunch of pop songs. Some of them they heard in the movie, some of them they didn't. Maybe a lot of people don't really care, let's face it. And for people who really want to relive the movie in a more direct sense, they can buy the score. It's a great idea. And, you know, like I said, people can take comments and fit it into any context, especially if you say more than a few words. I mean, maybe Warren Beatty is right when, in an interview, he's very, very cautious and he'll keep his comments to an absolute minimum. I've read so many interviews of him, and everybody's driving them crazy, and he says so little, but after going through the interviews I have in the last couple of years, it really makes me realize why he would be that way and how I'm much more inclined now than when I used to. When it's going to be a print article and only specific lines will be taken out, why I might want to say 1/10 of what I might say and really just narrow it down to a few comments. Otherwise, it'll just be twisted around and put in any context that the writer wants to. So.
Speaking of the political situation with music, how do you feel about the whole True Life Crew situation and the censorship?
Well, it's ridiculous. I mean, what more can anybody say? It's ludicrous. It's like having the 50s back again. Elvis Presley, he's going with his hips. Quick, pan the camera up. It's going to corrupt the youth of today. It's like, who would ever think that would come back again? I mean, obviously, it's the best thing that ever could have happened to 2 Live Crew. This controversy probably made them $1.5 million of record sales. I wish that would have happened to me. What can I say? I'd switch places with them in a second. Hey, go ahead, ban my album and sell 2 million of them while you're doing it. I mean, how ridiculous. I mean, come on, it's so ludicrous. I can't look at it seriously.
Is it easy for you, I'm jumping ahead to a different frame of mind, but is it easy for you to change hats, the Oingo Boingo of the performance group and the film, television, or orchestral composer?
No, the hat doesn't change very easily. At least, no. It's kind of like pushing through a very thick membrane between worlds. It's like, sometimes I feel it's like Poltergeist, remember the movie? Kind of moving between the one world of the ghosts and the other world. And it can be very tricky. And sometimes very difficult. Sometimes I feel like I really got to batter through this barrier to get to the other side. And then all of a sudden, okay, I could think orchestrally now. And when I've been thinking orchestrally for a long time, I got to get back into, wait a minute, 3-minute songs. How did I do that? And did I ever do that? Writing lyrics. Lyrics, what are lyrics? I don't write lyrics. I write brass lines and woodwind lines, and I could do this with the strings. Where do lyrics fit in? And then I have to completely bang my head and shake loose all the marbles and let them fall back in the other places, and then go, oh yeah, right. I've got a bass line and a backbeat and lyrics.
Where are you most comfortable?
I'm completely comfortable on both sides of the fence right now. The hard part is getting over the fence. I think each year the fence gets a little higher, and I've got to really work harder to scramble over it to the other side. But I don't plan on sealing off one side or the other for quite some time.
Great. Well, thank you. I just want to know if you can give us a promo for you. Wait.
Sure.
All you need to do is look in the camera and say, I'm Danny Elfman. Watch for me coming up on E! Entertainment Television.
Hi, I'm Danny Elfman. Watch for me coming up on E! Entertainment Television.
And one that says, I'm Danny Elfman, you're watching E! Entertainment Television.
I'm Danny Elfman, and you're watching E! Entertainment Television.
Great. Thank you very much.